The Zendarian Bazaar stretched for kilometers under the triple suns of Proxima Centauri's fifth planet, a chaotic tapestry of commerce that drew species from 12 systems. John Reeves weaved through the crowd, ducking under floating vendor platforms and sidestepping creatures whose biology defied easy classification. 6 months into his contract as a trade liaison for the Human Expansion Initiative, he'd learned to navigate alien marketplaces with confidence. "Something catches your eye, human?" The voice came from a stall displaying an assortment of bladed weapons. The vendor, a reptilian draconis with iridescent scales, gestured toward his wares with a three-fingered hand. "Just browsing," John replied, but his attention had indeed been captured by one particular knife. Unlike the others, practical tools clearly designed for utility, this one was a work of art. Its blade curved elegantly, seemingly made of a metal that caught the light and refracted it in impossible patterns. The handle was carved from something that resembled bone, inlaid with swirling blue stones. "Ah, you have good taste." The vendor's inner eyelids blinked rapidly. "That is Scarian craftsmanship. Their metalwork is unparalleled in this sector." John picked up the knife, testing its weight. "Perfect balance." "How much?" "For you?" 300 credits. 150, John countered automatically. "You wound me." 275. The haggling continued until they settled on 200 credits, a fair price for such craftsmanship. John secured the knife in its sheath and attached it to his belt, pleased with his purchase. It would make a fine addition to his small collection of interstellar curiosities. He didn't notice the sudden silence that fell over the nearest section of the bazaar, nor the way smaller aliens scrambled to clear a path. It wasn't until a shadow fell over him that John realized something was happening. He turned and found himself staring at a breastplate made of some burnished golden material. His eyes traveled upward, way upward, until he met the gaze of the tallest humanoid he'd ever seen. She had to be nearly 3 meters tall, with pale blue skin that shimmered with subtle markings. Her face was striking, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, and eyes that glowed amber. Silver-white hair was braided elaborately atop her head, with several smaller braids framing her face. "You carry the blade of choosing," she said, her voice surprisingly melodic despite its depth. John blinked. "I just bought it." The giantess's eyes widened, then her mouth curved into what might have been a smile. "You have chosen well, small one. I am Veralia K'Artoral, war leader of the northern Scarian clans." She placed a fist over her heart in what appeared to be a formal gesture. "I accept your proposal." "My what now?" John took an instinctive step back. The Draconis vendor made a strangled noise. "Great stars, human. Do you not know what you've done?" Before John could respond, Veralia reached down with surprising gentleness and lifted his right hand, the one holding the knife, up toward the light of the suns. "The blade bears my family's markings. By the ancient customs, you have selected me as your breeding mate." Her voice carried across the now silent marketplace. "I shall honor your choice with strength and fidelity until the stars grow cold." John's mouth opened but no words came out. Around them, aliens of various species began making gestures that seemed congratulatory. Some were even throwing what looked like flower petals. "There must be some mistake," he finally managed. "On Earth, my planet, we don't. That's not what buying a knife means." Veralia's expression didn't change. "The customs are clear. You are mine now, as I am yours." She placed a large hand on his shoulder. "Come, my chosen. We must return to my clan compound to begin the bonding rituals." Before John could protest further, he found himself being led firmly but gently through the parting crowd, still clutching the knife that had just changed his life in ways he couldn't begin to comprehend. The Scarian transport vessel cut through space with surprising grace for something so massive. John sat in a passenger compartment designed for beings twice his size, his feet dangling above the floor as he contemplated his predicament. Through the viewport, stars streaked by while his mind raced faster than the ship itself. "You appear troubled, small one." Veralia entered the compartment, ducking her head beneath the doorframe. Even seated, she towered over him. "I'm being taken to an alien planet because I bought a knife." "Troubled doesn't begin to cover it," John replied, trying to keep the edge from his voice. It wasn't her fault their cultures were so catastrophically different. Veralia tilted her head, the silver-white braids shifting with the movement. "The choosing blade is not merely a knife. It is a sacred artifact, crafted once in a lifetime by a warrior seeking a mate. Each bears unique markings of the Creator's bloodline." She reached out, her large hand hovering near the sheathed blade at his hip. "That you selected mine among all others, it honors me deeply." John sighed. "Where I come from, we don't select mates by purchasing weapons. We talk, spend time together, develop feelings." "We will do these things too," Veralia said with surprising gentleness. "The blade is only the beginning. It signifies potential, not completion." The ship shuddered slightly as it decelerated, and through the viewport, John could see a massive blue-green planet growing larger. "Scaria," Veralia announced with pride. "Home." An hour later, John found himself in a sprawling compound nestled between towering purple-leaf trees and crystalline rock formations. Everywhere he looked, blue-skinned giants went about their business, occasionally casting curious glances his way. "These are the living quarters of Clan Kr Toril," Veralia explained, leading him through structures built on a scale that made him feel like a child. "You are the first human to set foot here." "Lucky me," John muttered. They entered what appeared to be a gathering hall where several Scarians were seated around a low fire pit. All conversation ceased when they entered. An older female with elaborate facial markings rose. "So this is the one who chose your blade, daughter?" "Yes, Mother Elder." "This is John Reeves of Earth." Veralia placed a hand on John's shoulder, nearly encompassing his entire upper back. The elder approached, studying him intensely. Small, but his eyes show spirit. "What skills do you bring to our clan, human?" "I'm a trade liaison," John replied automatically. "I facilitate commerce between different species." This seemed to please the elder. "A diplomat. The stars favor us. Come, join our meal. We will begin learning of each other." For the next several hours, John was subjected to an intense cultural exchange that left his head spinning. He learned that Scarians valued strength and honor above all, but that their definition of strength encompassed far more than the physical. They were warriors, yes, but also poets, craftspeople, and traders. The choosing blade, he discovered, was indeed sacred. A Scarian crafted it only when they felt ready to seek a life partner. The blade was then sold to traders who distributed them across the stars. The belief was that fate would guide the right mate to select their specific blade. "But I didn't know any of this," John protested when he finally had a moment alone with Veralia in the quarters assigned to them, a massive room that made him feel like he was staying in a cathedral. "The universe knows," she replied simply. "Perhaps your heart recognized what your mind did not." John ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Look, you seem amazing, actually. Under different circumstances, I might have been interested in getting to know you. But this isn't how humans form relationships." Veralia sat on a large cushion, bringing her face closer to his level. "Tell me then, how do humans choose mates?" "We date, spend time together, talk, share experiences. We figure out if we're compatible, if we enjoy each other's company. If feelings develop, we might become exclusive, eventually commit to each other. The whole process can take months or years." Veralia considered this. "This is not so different from our bonding period. We have a full cycle of moons to determine if we are truly compatible. If either of us finds the match unsuitable, we may dissolve the connection without dishonor. John perked up at this revelation. So this isn't final? There's a way out? There is, Veralia confirmed, though something like disappointment flashed in her amber eyes. But it would be unusual to decide so quickly, without giving the bond a chance to form. John felt a twinge of guilt. She was trying to be understanding. And if he was honest with himself, there was something captivating about her, her confidence, her alien beauty, the surprising gentleness with which she treated him despite their size difference. "I'll try," he heard himself say. "I'll try to understand your ways, if you'll be patient with mine." Veralia's face brightened, her amber eyes glowing more intensely. "This is all I ask, small one." She reached out, hesitantly, and when he didn't pull away, she ran a single large finger along his cheek with surprising delicacy. "Rest now. Tomorrow, your introduction to clan life begins." As John settled onto the sleeping platform, thankfully designed with accommodations for smaller beings, he wondered what he'd gotten himself into. One thing was certain, his life would never be the same after buying that knife. Dawn broke over Scaria with an explosion of color unlike anything John had seen on Earth. Bands of gold, crimson, and violet stretched across the sky as two suns rose in tandem. He stood on the balcony of Veralia's quarters, breathing in air that tasted faintly of cinnamon and pine. "The first light is considered a blessing," Veralia's voice came from behind him. "To share it with another is intimate." John turned to find her dressed differently than the previous day. Gone was the ceremonial armor, replaced by a form-fitting garment that accentuated her athletic build. In the morning light, her blue skin had an almost luminescent quality, the subtle markings shifting with her movements. "It's beautiful," he admitted. "Your world has its charms." "As does its newest inhabitant," she replied, moving beside him. Standing next to her, the top of his head barely reached her chest. "You slept well?" "Better than expected," John said, surprising himself with the honesty. The strange gravity and unfamiliar sounds should have kept him awake, but exhaustion had claimed him quickly. Veralia handed him a cup filled with a steaming liquid. "Morning essence. It will strengthen you for the day ahead." John sipped cautiously. The taste was surprisingly pleasant, like honey and citrus with a hint of something earthy. "What exactly does the day ahead entail?" "Today, I show you my world," she said simply. "If we are to bond, you must know the life you would join." The next several hours were a blur of new experiences. Veralia took him through the clan compound, introducing him to warriors, craftspeople, and scholars. The Scarians, while initially intimidating in their size and formal mannerisms, were universally respectful toward him. "They accept me so easily," John remarked as they walked through gardens where plants responded to movement by changing colors. "I expected more resistance to an alien in your midst." "The blade chose," Veralia said, as if this explained everything. Then, seeming to remember his cultural differences, she elaborated. "Our history teaches that cross-species bonds bring strength and new perspectives. They are celebrated, not feared." Later, she took him to a training ground where Scarian warriors practiced combat with weapons and bare hands. John watched in awe as Veralia joined them, her movements fluid and powerful despite her size. She bested 3 opponents in quick succession, moving with a grace that seemed impossible for her stature. "You're incredible," he said when she returned to his side, barely winded from her exertions. A flush of deeper blue colored her cheeks. "You honor me with your words, John Reeves." It was the first time she had used his name rather than small one, and something about hearing it in her melodic voice sent an unexpected warmth through him. As dusk approached, Veralia led him to a secluded spring high in the crystalline formations overlooking the compound. Steam rose from waters that glowed with bioluminescent life. "The pools of reflection," she explained. "Our people come here to cleanse body and mind." Before John could respond, she began removing her garments with casual confidence. He averted his eyes instinctively, then found himself peeking despite his intentions. Her body was a marvel of alien beauty, powerfully built yet undeniably feminine, blue skin marked with swirling patterns that seemed to flow like water across her form. "Your species has taboos about nudity," Varalia observed, noticing his discomfort. "You may keep your coverings if you wish, but the waters heal best with direct contact." John hesitated, then decided that when on Scaria, do as the Scarians do. He undressed quickly and slipped into the water before his courage failed him. The liquid enveloped him in warmth that seemed to penetrate to his bones, easing aches he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. Varalia joined him, keeping a respectful distance. "Your form is different from ours," she observed, "yet pleasing in its design." "Thanks, I think," John replied, feeling a strange mix of embarrassment and pleasure at her frank appraisal. "Your species' discomfort with physical form is curious to me," she said, moving slowly closer. "Scarians believe the body is a vessel of honor, as worthy of appreciation as the mind it houses." "It's not that we don't appreciate bodies," John explained, becoming more comfortable as the water worked its magic. "We just consider them private. Intimate." "Intimacy," Varalia repeated, testing the word. "This concept is important to humans?" "Very," John confirmed. "Physical closeness is usually reserved for those we trust deeply." Varalia considered this, then moved to sit beside him on a submerged ledge. "Would it violate your customs if I touched you? I wish to understand your form better." John swallowed hard, surprised by the surge of desire her question triggered. "I wouldn't mind." With exquisite gentleness, she placed a hand on his shoulder, her blue fingers contrasting starkly with his skin. Slowly, she traced the contour of his arm, her touch feather-light. "Your kind seems fragile," she observed, "yet I sense strength in you. Different from ours, but no less real." John felt himself leaning into her touch. "We have our own kinds of resilience." Her fingers moved to his chest, palm flat against his heart. "It beats quickly," she murmured. "That's your effect," he admitted, surprising himself with his boldness. Varelia's eyes met his, amber depths seeming to glow in the twilight. "I find myself drawn to you, John Reeves. Not just by the blade's choosing, but by something I cannot name." John reached up, hesitantly touching her face, tracing the elegant line of her jaw. "I'm starting to think there might have been something to this blade business after all." Her smile transformed her face, making her look younger, almost vulnerable. With deliberate slowness, she lowered her face to his. "May I know the human way of physical connection?" In answer, John closed the distance between them, pressing his lips to hers. The kiss was awkward at first, alien anatomies learning each other, but quickly evolved into something that transcended their differences. Her skin tasted faintly of salt and something sweet, her lips softer than they appeared. When they finally parted, both were breathing harder. Varalia touched her lips with her fingers, wonder in her expression. "Your customs have merit, small one." For the first time, the nickname sounded like an endearment rather than a description. John smiled, realizing that his plans for escape had been the furthest thing from his mind all day. "I believe," he said softly, "I'm beginning to understand the appeal of Scarian traditions." 7 days into his stay on Scaria, John was beginning to adapt. The world's higher gravity no longer left him exhausted by midday. He'd learned to navigate the oversized furniture and doorways designed for beings twice his height. Most surprisingly, he'd grown comfortable with Varelia's presence, her towering form now a source of fascination rather than intimidation. They were breaking their fast in her quarters when a thunderous knock rattled the massive door. "Enter," Varelia called, straightening her posture. A young Scarian warrior stepped inside, fist pressed to chest in formal salute. "War leader, your presence is requested in the challenge circle. Dravik Tormalin has issued formal contest for your chosen mate." Verelia's expression hardened, amber eyes narrowing to glowing slits. When? The sun's highest point. Today. The messenger bowed and departed quickly. What's happening? John asked, though the knot forming in his stomach suggested he already knew. Verelia rose, her full height somehow more imposing than usual. A rival claims right to you. By our laws, I must defend my claim or release you to his. His? John's eyes widened. Wait, I don't. Dravik is an ambitious warrior from a neighboring clan, Verelia explained, already moving to a cabinet where her formal armor hung. He seeks to increase his standing by claiming a unique mate. Her hand stilled on the burnished metal. This complicates matters. John set down his cup with deliberate care. I'm not property to be won in combat. No, she agreed, turning to face him. You are not. By our law, the challenged mate must witness the contest and has final right of refusal, regardless of outcome. Her expression softened. You would not be bound to him, even should I fall. That's not reassuring. John stood, finding himself pacing. I don't want you fighting over me. I don't want anyone fighting over me. Verelia approached him slowly, kneeling to bring her face level with his. John Reeves, I have come to value our time together. More than I anticipated. Her large hand cupped his cheek with surprising gentleness. I would fight for that alone. The sincerity in her eyes made his chest tighten. Despite himself, despite the absurdity of his situation, he'd grown fond of her, her strength balanced by unexpected tenderness, her curiosity about his world, her patience with his cultural missteps. There's no way to avoid this, he asked. Only if you formally reject both claims, she said quietly. You would be free to return to your people with honor intact. The option hung between them, his clean escape from this misunderstanding, packaged neatly and handed to him. Yet he hesitated. Let me think, he finally said. Hours later, John stood at the edge of a circular arena carved from the living crystal of the mountains. The entire clan had gathered, along with visitors from neighboring settlements. At the center of the arena, Verelia stood resplendent in her ceremonial armor, her white-silver hair braided tightly for combat. Across from her stood her challenger. Dravik Tormalin was even larger than Verelia, his blue skin darker and crisscrossed with scars that spoke of many battles. His eyes, when they fell on John, held calculation rather than warmth. The Mother Elder raised her staff, and silence fell over the assembly. We gather to witness challenge of claim. Dravik Tormalin contests the right of Verelia Kaartoral to the human, John Reeves. She turned to John. The chosen has right of voice. Speak, if you would. All eyes turned to him. John swallowed hard, feeling the weight of alien customs and expectations. He thought of the diplomatic incident that could erupt if things went poorly. He thought of Verelia's gentle touch in the healing pools. I understand little of your ways, he began, his voice carrying in the expectant silence. Where I come from, people choose their own partners. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. But I respect your traditions enough to participate in them properly. He stepped forward, one hand moving to the ceremonial knife that had started this whole affair, the knife he now wore constantly at Verelia's insistence. I recognize Verelia Kaartoral's claim, he declared. I do not recognize any challenge to it. The crowd erupted in surprised exclamations. The Mother Elder raised her hand for silence. You reject the challenge before combat? This is unusual. I chose her blade, John said, finding confidence as he spoke. By your customs, that means something. I won't dishonor that choice by treating it as something to be won and lost in combat. Dravik stepped forward, his massive form radiating anger. This is not our way. The human does not understand our traditions. Perhaps, the Mother Elder said thoughtfully, he understands them better than you, Dravik Tormalin. The blade's choosing has always been sacred, the combat merely a formality when claims conflict. She turned to John. You choose Veralia Kaartorul freely, human? John's eyes found Veralia's. The surprise in them was evident, but behind it shone something else, hope, perhaps. Affection. I do, he said, the words feeling right as they left his lips. Then it is settled, the Mother Elder declared. The challenge is rejected. The bond remains with Veralia Kaartorul. Dravik growled something in the Scarian language and stalked from the arena. The crowd began to disperse, many casting curious glances at John as they left. Veralia approached slowly, removing her battle helmet. You surprise me, small one. I surprise myself, John admitted. A week ago, I was planning how to escape at the first opportunity. And now? Her voice was soft, almost vulnerable. Now I'm thinking maybe the universe knew what it was doing when it put that knife in my path. He reached up, daring to touch the side of her face. I'm not ready to say this is forever, but I'm ready to say it's worth exploring. Veralia knelt before him, bringing her face level with his. With deliberate slowness, she leaned forward to press her forehead against his, a Scarian gesture of profound intimacy. The blade chose well, she murmured. John closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of her skin against his. For a human who had accidentally bought himself an alien fiancé, things were turning out better than he could have imagined. Take me back to our quarters, he said softly. I think we have more cultural exchange to explore. Veralia's eyes widened slightly, then a smile spread across her face. As my chosen wishes. As they left the arena together, John realized he no longer felt like a prisoner of circumstance, but a man making choices, unexpected ones, perhaps, but his own nonetheless. Morning light filtered through the crystalline windows of their quarters, painting iridescent patterns across John's skin. He stretched languidly, his body pleasantly sore from the previous night's activities. Beside him, Veralia slept, her massive form curled protectively around his much smaller one. Their physical relationship had evolved with surprising ease. What might have seemed impossible due to their size difference had become a dance of gentle discovery. Veralia's strength was always controlled, her touch delicate despite hands that could crush stone. John had found unexpected pleasure in her alien anatomy, the subtle ridges of her skin, the way her markings grew more luminescent with arousal, the rumbling purr that vibrated through her chest when he found sensitive spots along her neck. He traced a finger along one of the swirling patterns on her shoulder, marveling at how naturally blue her skin was, how the markings seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. Amber eyes fluttered open, focusing on him with immediate clarity. You watch me sleep, small one? Just appreciating the view, he replied with a smile. Hard to believe it's been a month already. Veralia sat up, the sheet falling away to reveal her statuesque form. The final bonding ceremony approaches. Are your thoughts still certain? The question carried weight. Tomorrow would mark the end of their trial period, the time in which either could walk away without dishonor. After that, their union would be formally recognized by Scarian law and, through recent diplomatic agreements, Earth authorities as well. I've been thinking about that, John said, sitting up to face her. About us, about the future. Concern flickered in her eyes. You have doubts? Not about you, he assured her quickly. About logistics. My work with the Human Expansion Initiative will eventually require my return to Earth, at least temporarily. And you have responsibilities here as war leader. Veralia's expression relaxed. Such concerns are practical, not matters of the heart. She reached out to cup his cheek in her palm. The stars drew us together despite the vastness between our worlds. Distance within a single star system seems a small obstacle in comparison. John leaned into her touch. When did you get so philosophical? Perhaps your human perspective has influenced me, she replied with a hint of humor. Or perhaps I simply speak truth. The blade chose well, John Reeves. The ceremonial knife that had started everything now occupied a place of honor on their wall. John had come to appreciate its craftsmanship even more as he learned about Skarian metallurgy and the spiritual significance encoded in its design. It did, he agreed. Though I'm still not convinced it wasn't just blind luck. The universe is rarely so careless, Veralia said. She rose from their bed, moving with the fluid grace that still captivated him. Come. The Mother Elder requested your presence this morning. She has a proposal I believe will interest you. An hour later, freshly bathed and dressed in a human Skarian hybrid garment designed for him by clan artisans, John stood before the Mother Elder in her private chambers. Veralia stood at his side, a formal half-step behind him, a position of honor for a chosen mate. John Reeves of Earth, the Elder greeted him. Your presence has brought unexpected changes to our clan. Good ones, I hope, he replied. Indeed. Her ancient eyes studied him with approval. Your knowledge of interspecies trade has already improved our standing with the Galactic Commerce Guild. And your union with our war leader strengthens our diplomatic ties with humanity. John inclined his head, having learned the proper gestures of Skarian respect. The benefits have been mutual. I've gained much from your people's knowledge and traditions. Which brings me to my proposal, the Mother Elder continued. The Council of Clans has authorized the creation of a new position, Interspecies Ambassador. Someone who would represent Skarian interests to other worlds while facilitating cultural exchange and trade. John's diplomatic training recognized the opportunity immediately. That sounds like an important role. One for which you are uniquely qualified, she confirmed. You would have authority to negotiate on behalf of all Skarian clans, with Veralia as your formal protector and partner. The implications hit him all at once. This would allow us to travel together. To split our time between worlds. Veralia's hand came to rest lightly on his shoulder. As I said, practical concerns often have simpler solutions than we first imagine. The position is yours, if you accept, the Mother Elder said. After tomorrow's bonding ceremony, of course. I accept, with gratitude, John replied without hesitation. Later, as they walked the crystal gardens that had become one of John's favorite places on Skaria, Veralia broke the comfortable silence between them. You seem thoughtful, my chosen. I was just reflecting on how differently things turned out than I expected, he admitted. When I first came to Skaria, I felt trapped by circumstance. Now I'm choosing this life freely. And I am honored by your choice, she replied, stopping to face him. In the dappled light filtering through the crystalline trees, her blue skin shimmered with inner luminescence. The ways of the universe are mysterious. What begins as accident may become destiny. John reached up, standing on tiptoes to touch her face. I never believed in destiny before I met you. She leaned down, bringing her forehead to his in the intimate Skarian gesture he'd come to cherish. Then perhaps the knife did not choose us, she whispered. Perhaps we chose each other, across the stars, before we ever knew what we sought. That night, as they lay entwined in their shared chambers, John reflected on the strange journey that had led him here. A simple trip to an alien marketplace. An impulsive purchase. A cultural misunderstanding that had changed the course of his life. Tomorrow they would complete the bonding ceremony, making official what his heart already knew to be true. His hand found the curve of Veralia's hip, his touch rousing her from half-sleep. Can't rest, small one, she murmured, turning to face him. Just thinking about how lucky I am, he replied, meeting her amber gaze. Not everyone finds their perfect match in the vastness of space. Her answering smile was radiant. Then we must make the most of this gift the universe has granted us. As her massive form moved above him with practiced gentleness, as their bodies joined in the intimate dance they had perfected despite their differences, John knew with absolute certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be. He had traveled to the stars seeking adventure and opportunity. Instead, he had found home in the arms of a warrior giantess who called him her chosen one. And all because he bought a knife.